Hi, I'm Dan Krynas, host of the Leader of Learning podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hey, welcome back. Steve here, and today I've got a cool conversation with my friend, colleague, author, and fellow podcaster, Jeff Ikler. He's the author of Shifting: How School Leaders Can Create a Culture of Change and the host of the podcast, Getting Unstuck, Cultivating Curiosity. Join us as we have fun talking about one more and finding our purpose or remembering our purpose. Cool conversation. You're going to love this talk. Thanks for listening, and don't forget, it would be so awesome if you shared the podcast with your friends, your neighbors, your colleagues, your family members. How about it, huh? Thanks for listening. Enjoy the show.
It's the Education Podcast, your favorite show, with lots of groovy guests, and they share what they know. So crank it up to 10 and let your neighbors know that here's another show with Dr. Steve Miletto. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12, with Dr. Steve Miletto.
Steve, welcome to Getting Unstuck, Cultivating Curiosity.
Hey, Jeff, it's awesome to see you again, and welcome to Teaching, Learning, Leading, K-12.
Yeah, excellent. So, Steve, for my listeners, tell us a little bit about your show.
Cool. So my show is basically, I try and find topics that are going to be of interest to the classroom teacher or the building administrator. And through that, I hope that they find some support or, if nothing else, some escape, because I also bring on thrill writers and stuff like this that talk about the writing process. So, we have a lot of different things going on there, but it's all about supporting the classroom teacher and the building administrator.
Awesome. Very good. I'll tell your audience a little bit about me, if that's okay.
Please, yeah. Let's talk to us about Getting Unstuck and Getting Unstuck, Cultivating Curiosity. There you go.
Right. So I've been at this, I think, a little bit less time than you have, but over the 5 years that I've been involved with this, we're now in our third act, our third iteration. We started off talking about change in general, institutional change, leaders change, that sort of thing. Then we switched over to education because that was our background. We had both been teachers. We had both worked for an educational publisher. And then when my co-host left a little over a year ago, I really got the bug to focus on curiosity because I just sense that as a people, as leaders, we need to be asking more questions. As opposed to just jumping in and trying to solve things, we need to be asking more questions and helping our staff to ask more questions, if you will. So that's really where I am.
Very cool. And what's neat is that we've stayed in contact over the years. What's really cool, I've been a listener of your podcast through its different stages and such, and I got a chance to interview you and your co-host and co-writer of your book Shift. Can you share something about Shift real quick? I know you're humble about that stuff, but it's a cool book, and it'd be cool if you shared that.
So that was based on a lot of experience shifting how school leaders can create a culture of change, and it came from part of my experience as a teacher, but a lot of it came from when I worked in the educational publishing space for almost 40 years. I worked with a lot of educators across the country. And what I saw, I'll say universally, obviously there are some people that do this pretty well, but almost universally, a lot of educators had trouble changing with purpose, if you will. They would do the next shiny thing, that they had heard at a conference or whatever. And then they would drop that, and then they would move to something else. And it was all understandable. They were trying to get results for their schools, but they weren't necessarily sticking with something. And the bigger issue was, and we're going to get into this today, it's only one of my favorite topics, Steve, is they weren't really, they may have had a purpose. It may have been what their school board posted in one of the staff rooms, 12 points. But the problem is those things often sound like the school district right down the road, right?
Oh, yeah.
And what we tried to do in the book was say purpose has to be much more concise. It's got to be something that can roll off the tongue any staff member you catch in the hallway has to be able to say what it is that school, that district is trying to achieve. So that's really what the book was about. Because educators are just inundated with, you should do this, you should do that. And they often try to respond, but it gets them into, as I said, it gets them into this never-ending cycle of, well, we're going to do this for a while, and then we're going to shift to this for a while, and then we're going to shift to this, and staff gets kind of burnt out.
Yeah, so much. And it's an awesome book because it really addresses that. So I want to make sure you got a chance to share that because it's cool. So, I got to tell you, listeners, if you haven't checked out Jeff's book, Shifting, you need to do that. What's the whole title, Jeff?
Shifting, How School Leaders Can Create a Culture of Change.
So cool. So it's good stuff. So let's talk a little bit about how this came about. I mean, we started talking about some of the different stuff, and I mean, like one of your big areas is coaching versus mentoring, and we talked about a couple different ideas, and so I mean, you want to share a little bit about how this kind of
yeah. So back to your point that we've interviewed each other. You and I have been talking for a couple years now. I consider you a friend, not just a co-podcaster or a co-educator, if you will.
Appreciate it. So I consider you a friend too. So it's cool.
So how this started really was me going to you and saying, Steve, I want to interview some educators who are nurturing curiosity in their classroom, because there is so much bad press these days about education and teaching. Educators have gone through COVID. They've had to endure, unfortunately, terribly, school violence, with shootings. There has been a large controversy over what teachers can and can't teach and how they can teach. And what gets lost in that is the extreme dedication that teachers bring to the classroom every day, trying to do the best on behalf of the kids and the communities they serve. So I wanted to do some stories about curiosity, how teachers are helping to develop curiosity on the part of their kids, because there's great research, Steve, that shows that after third grade, curiosity, creativity, innovation plummets. But it's not universal. There are a lot of teachers out there doing very cool things. And so I went to my genius friend, Steve Miletto, and said, can you hook me up with a couple of teachers to showcase that? And in the course of that, you and I got to talking about coaching versus mentoring, being a change agent, AI, which I know is one of your interesting topics, teacher burnout, self-care, work-life balance. And during the course of that conversation, you started talking about you, and I started talking about me, right?
Right.
And so we thought this is kind of interesting, because a lot of our listeners are probably going through the same mental gymnastics that you and I are, trying to figure out what I call the next big thing. Like, what's the next thing for me?
Right.
So, Steve, you want to talk about what you're up to in that regard?
I appreciate it, Jeff. Yeah, one of the things that, so this is my 36th year in public education in the state of Georgia. And and a lot of times when I say that to my friends, they go, "You're in your 36th year?" And I go, "Yeah." And they're like, "Why have you retired, man?" And I go, "Well, I don't think I want to retire." And, and they're like, "Well, and they talk to you about finances and stuff." Well, then I've talked with finance people, and they said, "Well, this is why people in Georgia retire around the age of, at least 32 to 34 years. They don't really, they try not to go past that, because, and then a lot of times they become, they appear at vendors, like they're selling yearbooks or rings and things like this. And I'm like, that's not really what I want to do. And so I've been thinking about it over the last bunch of years, especially when I got close to 30, as I was watching some of my colleagues retire, and some go to Florida and some go to selling yearbooks. And not that there's anything wrong with selling yearbooks. That's not my point. But I started thinking, what's next for me? And then something happened. I had a health event where, I had to have surgery, a 10-hour surgery where, they had to remove a tumor out of my head, and without going into details, it's like the recovery process really sat me down and made me think about, is this how I'm going to end? Because I'm recovering from this, and I could easily just see myself stopping. But in something that started nagging at me was that I've got to have more in me. And I actually heard a presentation, and then I read a book by the gentleman's name's Ed Miletto, and he has a neat podcast, and John Maxwell uses him a lot, and he has this book where he talks about one more, and he has this message where he talks about one more, and that's just started echoing with me about, I'm not ready to retire. I got one more in me. And at the same time, now a friend of mine was talking to me about, and it was so tempting. He's like, because first of all, it'd be cool to work with him. And second of all, he said, why don't you just come do just podcasting? And where you go do podcasting for other people, you're the one who you interview them and then you create the podcast and all this stuff. And I that's cool. That would be neat. And then I started thinking, am I ready to do that full time? Because it's kind of like, it's neat, but is that really what and that's where it started hitting me that I think really part of what my purpose is that I go to places to help deal with shifting or changing or, getting, we've been in this one track and we really need to get shifted to another track or something like this. And that's kind of what started hitting me, going back to Ed's message about the one more, because what he was talking about was always like, he's a big weightlifter, people say, give it one more, don't quit yet, give it one more. And
right.
Yeah. And it started hitting me, and I was like, well, I may not be a weightlifter, far from it, but I could give it one more. And to me, what that meant was looking at what my purpose has become over the last bunch of years. I mean, I got into teaching because I wanted to make history fun. And, so that was kind of my purpose. Then I found out there's more to teaching than making the class fun. Yeah, there's a lot more to it. But that helped me design my purpose that I happen to work for a great leader who his whole job was he saw it as making it a place where teachers could teach. And he wanted people who did exactly what you're going to talk about, which is generate that curiosity. And I went, when I grow up, I want to be like Bob. That was his name. And so that set me on the route of, I want to be a change agent. And so I, set myself up to do that type of stuff. And so that's the one more in me, is that I can help whatever it is. If an organization needs to take another step in a new direction or something like that, that's the one more for me. And so that's what I'm trying out. Cause there's so many other things. The podcasting thing, I'd love to write a book. I don't know if, that's ever I tried, putting some, although, there's a lot of people who were told no more than I was. I was told no twice, but anyway, I don't know if that helps, but that's my thoughts about one more. Kind of that idea of, I still got gas in the tank. My purpose is still there. So
Steve, how does one more actualize itself in the work that you're currently doing?
So what that means is that I help an organization look at where it needs someone who's helping to put some new energy into it, to look at the different directions it could go to help the systems that it works for, because the systems are constantly looking for help. And so that's what, it's not that the thing, it's broken or something like this. It's that it needs some new energy and new direction. And that's my one more here, is that I have those thoughts about, let's come together as a team and let's figure this out, how we can be focused on, that next step that we go to. What do we stand for? What is it that we think about? What is it that, what makes us different than other people that would make a system say, we really want to go to the stuff we want to participate in what you do.
Right. So when you talk about systems, you're talking about school districts.
Yes.
At least one of the systems that you deal with, you're talking about school districts.
Correct. I'm talking about school districts where, in my role, what I do is I'm an executive director of what's called a RESA, and it's called a Regional Educational Service Agency, and they basically they exist in different forms across the United States, but it's all about supporting their school systems, having service and support. You have a team in which you address the needs of your school systems, and sometimes we reach out and say, here, we can help you with this. Would you like help? Or sometimes they ask, hey, can you help us with this? And my answer is always yes. And then I come back to the team and say, can we do it? And let's figure it out. That type of thing.
Yeah. So what's something that your superintendents are wrestling with?
Oh, there's a whole bunch of things right now. But the biggest one is it's twofold, which is they don't want to lose good people because it's very stressful right now. And
Right.
and they listen to people. There's all kinds of voices out there that, for I don't know. I know this. I don't have an exact measurement of this, but for about 40 years, they've been hearing that anybody can teach. And then you have everything comes to a head with COVID hits, and their world suddenly is thrust into this whole idea of being virtual and having to deal with different things there. And you have kind of changes in our society where people come in yelling before they listen, and you have two sides against each other even from the beginning, and that puts a lot of stress on classroom teacher and building administrators. So when I said twofold, it's not just the teachers, it's the administrators. They don't want to lose good people who might go, this is more stressful than I thought it was going to be, and head out the door. And so that's a big part of what we're trying to figure out, is finding ways of giving them the tools and support to help them stay.
It's interesting, Steve. My wife is head of sales for an educational publishing company, and she had a couple of positions open recently for like district salespeople, regional salespeople, and overwhelmingly, the people that were applying to her job were not salespeople; they were educators.
Wow.
Yeah, they were people who said, just as you said, I'm kind of done. I need to do something else. I still want to use my education background.
Right.
All right, which she loves, the fact that they're coming and she doesn't have to teach them about education. But I think that's emblematic that people, they're looking for their next big thing too,
Right.
But I'm encouraged that they still want to do education. They just need a different venue to do it in.
Yeah, it's so it's in my last before I moved into this role as a director, I was principal of schools that need some adjustments. In my last school, I'll never forget this teacher who there was someone who was recruiting. Now, there's nothing wrong with selling insurance. Okay, so before I say this,
You're going to get all sorts of calls, Steve.
Right, exactly. But it's rough when one of your best teachers is recruited by somebody who, at one time, he used to be a very good teacher, and he was picking off teachers left and right, bringing them to the insurance agency, and I found myself saying to people, is that really your calling? Is that really, you think that's going to be your thing? Because he's promising you big money in the insurance agency. And, it's unfortunate because today you have all kinds of different directions that people have gone. Like, maybe I can make money on YouTube. Maybe I can make money over here, And the unfortunate thing is that what they're really doing is they're kind of overwhelmed in their world of education. And so they're looking for something that was not going to, stress them out so much.
Yep. So your story resonates a lot with me, Steve, because I have found that I keep gravitating towards this idea of purpose, individual and organizational purpose. And I know that's partly what you work on with your superintendents. And this really started for me when I was doing some educational consulting a few years back. And I was talking to an assistant principal of a fairly big high school. It was a good sized district. And she was all excited because their graduation rate had gone up. And I don't mean to disparage graduation rates, but when we dug into this, that seems to me an outcome of what you're doing versus what you're all about as a school system. The goal should not be increasing graduation rates. The goal should be doing something that results in increasing graduation rates, if that makes sense. And what this district was missing was, what are we about our kids in our community? What are we trying to do on behalf of our kids or our community? And they could not answer the question, what's your overall purpose here? And that got me started on this whole examination of personal and organizational purpose. And I've been reading this wonderful book by a gentleman named Kevin Cashman, and it's called Leadership from the Inside Out. And I use this both in my consulting work with school leaders, but also in my coaching with non-school people. And this was so fascinating. He said, we largely over-focus on the what and the how and under-focus on the why. We don't talk enough about why we're doing what we're doing. What is it that we're trying to accomplish on behalf of those we serve? And he asked a penetrating question in there. Why do we exist? Think about that. Why do we exist as a school system?
Yeah, and I think that's powerful because I know a lot of people can't even answer that question. They say, and as a note, I'm pretty sure that, if you go way back when education became a way of doing something with all the people that were moving into the towns and the industrial areas from the farms, and it became, its purpose was to at least give something to people who don't have a real purpose. But we've changed so much, and I think you could have 5 people in a room and have different reasons why they think we exist.
There you go. And I look at what you're talking about, teachers leaving the field, teachers feeling burnt out. And it reminded me, I'm kind of a movie geek. I write screenplays as a hobby. So it reminded me of a scene from LA Confidential, where 2 cops were talking about why they wanted to become cops. And one of them, the actor is Guy Pearce. He asked the other actor, who's Kevin Spacey, he said, why did you want to become a cop? And Kevin Spacey pauses, and it's a beautiful pause. And he goes, I don't remember.
That's powerful.
And I just wonder how many of us in education who have been beaten down over the years, having to adjust to so many things, we may have forgotten why we wanted to get into education in the beginning, and it hasn't been necessarily reinforced in the system that they're in, and so they look for something else.
It's so telling because when you talk about it, it does, whatever their reasoning for thinking about it, it in many cases it's a fragile balance there, and it does make it easy to say, well, I don't know, maybe something on YouTube will work for me, or let's go back to my ring selling, maybe that's going to work better for me. And it's and to all my friends who do that, this is nothing against what you do. All right, it's just not my thing.
Right.
But it's it's very fragile. I think a lot of people forget, why do we do this? Because to me, that's the power in what we do. If we can constantly remind ourselves why we thought this was important, working with kids, and, there's all kinds of little sayings that go with it. I touch the future, I teach, or,
right. Right.
But you really do. There's nothing cooler than, someone who finds you a bunch of years later, unless they're looking for you because they're still mad at you because of something.
You gave me a D, Mr. Miletto.
Yeah, exactly. But the ones, they find you and they're in their early 40s, late 30s, and they say, hey, I just wanted to tell you. Because I've even had ones who've apologized to me for how they behave, because when I was an assistant principal, I kept seeing them all the time. I've had ones in their 30s and they've apologized to me. And I've had others who, they seek you out and they remember you being a teacher and stuff. And in my world where I work now, it's the coolest thing. I was introducing myself to all these groups of educators at this conference, saying, hey, I'm going to be up in the area now. I'm now the director here, and blah, blah, blah. Well, afterwards, someone came up to me who was a principal at an elementary school, and lo and behold, I had been her world history teacher way back when she was 16 years old. I'm like, oh, my world's catching up to me.
Well, that can make you feel good, or it can make you feel old. One or both.
Exactly. It does both, but it's kind of cool though that even I mean, when they can start talking about things that, something that they liked or something like that happened in those days, and you go, oh, that's cool. That's so cool. So, I mean, what other profession? There's not very few that do stuff like that. I mean, you may go to a doctor later and say, thank you for saving my life. But, which, by the way, not that there's anything wrong with that either. But the point is that, it's what a cool thing about teaching is that, you create fans forever.
You impacted somebody.
Yes.
Right.
Right. And they may not realize it until, it's 10 years down the road and suddenly they go, oh my gosh, like those V8 commercials that you used to have on TV a long time ago.
I remember those, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. But
I've used those a couple of times with people and I've gotten a blank stare, because it's like,
that's one of the problems. If I grew up on lots of reruns from the 60s. And, there were reruns in my day, and I still continue to watch them over the time. And so then you use references that people go, what? Oh, I think I saw that on Me TV or something, Oh!
Exactly. Yeah. So this purpose bug, much like what you described with One More, has really caught me. I'm going to be 72 in December.
Congratulations.
And the podcast keeps me busy. My coaching keeps me busy. But there's this nagging feeling inside that says there's something else that I have yet to discover. And it's so interesting, Steve. I was again referring back to Cashman. He talks about this. He said, don't look externally for your thing. It's in you, and it's always been in you.
That's cool.
Through life, we do what's expected of us or what we think other people want us to do. And we often forget that it's almost like it's DNA imprinted on us. And I'm just sensing there's something else in me that I haven't done yet. And I don't know if it's a second book, or what, but there is this kind of nagging thing, and I'm trying to get at it through the curiosity by understanding myself better, what motivates me, what my values are, and things like that. You're never too old to do those kinds of exercises,
That's excellent.
So, yeah.
That's cool. Cause that's, as you're trying to find that out, as you're trying to figure it out, cause like I'm hoping I heard the right voice in my shifting and stuff like this. Like you're trying to figure out the same thing. It's like, I think to me, that's something that's so important. I think that's one of the things that unfortunately has driven off some educators is that they don't they're not listening to a voice about what their purpose is or what they,
right.
They're listening to confusing voices that they're, I don't want to sound like a victim, but kind of are falling victim to listening to that wrong voice and that voice may be an outside voice, not even inside, it's not themselves. It's somebody else saying, oh, you don't want to do that anymore. Why don't you do this?
Right.
Kind of the guy that was picking off my teachers to sell insurance,
Right.
Not once again, not that there's anything wrong with selling insurance for all my listeners.
Angry letters on the way. Yeah. I had this idea of in being inside of you reinforced. I watched a trailer of a Steven Spielberg movie that's coming out. And I think it's called The Fabelmans.
I think you're right.
And it's autobiographical. It's about him growing up and becoming interested in film work, but it's about his family. And when he was being interviewed, somebody said, well, why did you do this film? And he said something to the effect that he's 75 or going to be 75. He said, I looked at all of the movies that I've done and I asked myself, what's the one movie I haven't done that I would regret not doing?
Cool.
And that just nailed it for me.
That's
it's like,
cool.
because he's talking about that and what does he do? He does an autobiographical film about himself and his family. But it really nailed that idea that it's inside of you.
That's awesome. Cause if you were to ask me that, I think that's the same thing. That's what I'm referring to as voices. By the way, not really voices. Okay. I'm not hearing other people talk inside my head, but I think
I can edit that out, Steve, if you want,
Thanks.
Yeah.
It's one of those things but it really is kind of a voice where you're like, just like it sounds like Spielberg's talking about, which is, would I have regrets about not doing that, doing this, or not pursuing, or stopping too soon? Did I stop too soon? Kind of like that. What's that? The story about the acres of diamonds or whatever. Have you heard that story where the person stops looking for diamonds and then sells off the land, and then the next person who buys the land goes a little bit further, and boom, there's all the diamonds, and it's almost like that feeling.
So, Steve, what's a thought you want to leave our listeners with when you think about one more, purpose, and that general topic?
I think the biggest thing is that if you're feeling like things are overwhelming, or you got too much going on or something like this, it may be that you just need to revisit your purpose, to revisit what your thoughts are about what it is that you do well or like to do, and even if it's like here's an old reference for you, take a left turn at Albuquerque. I mean, it's like it's like the thing where maybe you just need to revisit that, and I'd like all the listeners to this to think about that, is that we just need to revisit our purpose, because maybe we've taken a left turn in Albuquerque and we're not really doing our purpose or addressing it. We're just kind of stuck in a rut where we got, or maybe there's that thing, if you're feeling like giving up, there's that one more that you could go after. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
How about you, Jeff? What do you think?
I think I'm going to riff on that a little bit, that for me, it's, if you're feeling that inside of you, that nagging feeling, if you're hearing the voices of wanting more, champion that. We often think about our inner critic voice, the negative voice, but if you hear that other voice trying to come out, that's a good sign that there's still something in you that needs to get out, and to explore that, and explore it with curiosity.
Oh, I love that. That's cool.
So, Steve, this is a wonderful way to start the day, to spend 45 minutes with you, and on topic which we obviously have a lot in common about. So I look forward to the next one.
I do too, Jeff. This has been awesome. I mean, this is a cool way to spend time with a friend and a colleague, and talking about things that matter to us, and getting a chance to hear each other out. This is cool. I like this idea. So I can't wait till we do the next one. This will be awesome.
Very good. It could be AI if you like. So.
Yes. Is it real or is it not? Or how about, is it in the days of 2001 and we got Hal talking to Dave,
Yeah. I thought you were going to say, is it real or is it Memorex?
Yes. I should have said that. That would have been good. Nice. Well, Jeff, I look forward to our next conversation. It'll be cool.
All right, my friend. Take care. Take care. Stay healthy.
Hey, you have been listening to Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12, a podcast to help you help kids achieve their dreams. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is a member of the Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is a member of the podcast network based in Canada called Voice Ed Radio. Voice Ed Radio, your voice is right here. The opinions expressed on Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 are those of the guests and host. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is intended to share ideas, advice, and suggestions. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is produced for educational purposes. Hey, thanks for listening. It would be awesome if you visited my website at stephenmiletto.com and connected with me, left a review, and listened to more episodes. And by the way, you could also share it with your friends, with your family, and your colleagues. Thanks so much. You're awesome.